Thank you, President Miller, Hamline University faculty and staff, Hamline families, and graduating seniors. It is a privilege to be among all of you today, but it is a special honor to be here with the class of 2016. Congratulations, graduates. I'd like to take you back roughly 100 years to 1918 so you can meet the person I've spent so much time with of late, Anna Arnold Hedgeman, the first African-American graduate of Hamline University, the namesake of your Hamline Center for Student Diversity Initiatives and Programs, a stalwart of the long civil rights movement of the 20th century, and an individual who should be a household name in our nation. 1918. By all accounts, the fall of 1918, when the young Anna Arnold, not yet Anna Arnold Hedgeman, was entering Hamline, was a punishing time for Minnesotans, as it was for the rest of the nation. Newspapers published long lists of local men who lost their lives in the bloody Great War in Europe. Fires in the forests of northern Minnesota combined to form the worst natural disaster in the state's history, killing nearly 500 people, injuring or displacing over 50,000, destroying nearly 40 communities, and blackening 250,000 acres of land. The influenza pandemic that killed nearly 50 million people across the globe affected 75,000 Minnesotans and claimed the lives of more than 10,000. Unlike most influenzas, which killed those whose health was in some way compromised, this flu ravaged populations of previously healthy young adults. So panic about its spread triggered the closing of churches, schools, saloons, dance halls, public libraries, and theaters, lessening people's contact with the infected, but increasing their isolation. For many, the fall of 1918 must have felt like the apocalypse. But Anna Arnold, a teenager at home in Anoka, Minnesota, was in many ways a typical young person. Her concerns in the fall of 1918 were more about the particulars of her own life than any national or global calamities. She knew that her life would someday be about service to others, but for now, she was focused intently and selfishly in the way of the young on herself and her prospects in the world. Few of her peers at Anoka High School pursued higher education, but there was no question that the brilliant and popular Anna Arnold would attend college. And from her father's perspective, there was little question about where she would go. A graduate of a historically black college and university, an HBCU, one might expect that William Arnold would want his oldest child to have a similar experience. But as a community leader with little tolerance for secularism and a desire to keep his daughter close, William had his eye on Hamline, where he imagined Anna would reside safely in the hands of the Methodists. For her part, Anna could not have been more excited to be leaving home, coming to this campus, gaining a bit of independence, and taking charge of the next phase of her life. Hamline, as you may know, was among the first coeducational universities in the nation. The college's first students, a group of 70 young men and 2 young women, initially attended classes on the second floor of the general store in the village of Red Wing in 1856, even before Minnesota was a state. The 2 women in that class, Sisters Elizabeth and Emily Soren, would have been enrolled in what was called the Lady Baccalaureate of Arts program, which abridged the male program in some interesting and strange ways. Lady students, they seem to believe, had an abridged intellectual capacity. But by the time Anna Arnold arrived at Hamline in September of 1918, women and men pursued the same curriculum. But while the campus had become a bit more accustomed to women, at least some women, it was certainly not accustomed to African American women, or African American students at all, for that matter. Immediately, Anna found that some people, students and faculty alike, stiffened in her presence. And there it was, right? The questioning. Did they really stiffen, or did she imagine it? Did they stiffen because they were racist, because they were shy, or because they hadn't yet had the opportunity to exercise a muscle in their brains and in their bodies, that of talking across and creating relationships through difference? Minnesota's African American population at the time was confined by and large to a few neighborhoods in the Twin Cities, and most of Anna's fellow students would have had little, if any, contact with Black Minnesotans. One St. Paul Business College specifically advertised that, quote, colored persons were not welcome as students, but most schools probably felt little need to advertise a prohibition that was so unlikely to be challenged, even in a state that considered itself quite progressive. But change came here as elsewhere, and on this campus, Anna Arnold faced discrimination and embarked on what became a lifelong practice of deliberate living, one that would have a profound effect on her life, but also on the life of our nation. She took the values she learned at home and expanded on at Hamline, in and out of the classroom. That race does not matter, and at the same time that it matters profoundly. That one has to pick and choose one's battles. That race and socioeconomic class and gender intersect in multiple ways. And that the practices of racism are damaging to white Americans just as surely as they are damaging to people of color. Anna found professors who believed in her as well as those who did not. She made friends, some of whom she knew paid a price for being friends with the sole African American girl on campus. She honed her ideas about the need for intellectual life and for service to others. She also, importantly, began to develop her own theology. In her case, a pluralistic Christian theology that came to guide her life and work. When Anna Arnold Hedgeman was invited to speak on the Hamline campus in 1960, almost 40 years after her graduation, she told a story about visiting another college, one much like Hamline. When a group of what she considered otherwise thoughtful young people told her they hoped she would talk about anything but religion, she chose as the text for her remarks the Lord's Prayer, Anna Arnold Hedgeman style. Our Father, which art in heaven, she recited, hallowed be thy name. But as always, she modified the next phrase, concluding with, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, and leaving off the bit about heaven. Hedgeman's theology, which reached across the boundaries of creed and which guided her civil rights work for more than 7 decades, chose earth over heaven, action over contemplation, and her Lord, in her case Jesus, not as an otherworldly savior, but rather, as she put it, as, quote, the tough, courageous Son of God who studied, worked, dreamed, planned, and lived to produce change in his turbulent world. Anna Arnold graduated from Hamline University in 1922, nearly 100 years ago, equipped with a firm sense of self, the expectation from her faculty and peers of excellence, a belief in a just God, and a refusal to give way to racial prejudice. In her words, I left equipped with my BA degree a sense of adventure, and a deep conviction that the world was waiting for me to serve it as best I could. A dignified woman and a scrappy freedom fighter, Hedgeman would upend conventions throughout her personal and professional life. She cared deeply for the dignity and welfare of all people and acted most passionately on behalf of the dispossessed. Immediately following her graduation, she taught for 2 years in the Deep South, experiencing the depths of depravity of Jim Crow, realizing then that even if she did not choose to claim race as a cause, the fight against racism had claimed her. During the Great Depression, she had the impossible job in Harlem of deciding which of the families facing long-term unemployment and even starvation needed food support the most. Her response was to fight successfully for civil service opportunities for Black and Puerto Rican New Yorkers. In response to continued discrimination against African Americans in the wartime industries during World War II, she took on the task of directing national efforts for permanent fair labor legislation. In the post-war period, believing that all people had to support their concerns with their dollars as well as their voices, she oversaw the first attempt to have African Americans influence a presidential election. In the 1960s, as the only woman on the organizing committee that planned the 1963 March on Washington, at which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his venerated "I Have a Dream" speech, Hedgeman orchestrated the involvement of the majority of 50 to 60,000 white Americans who participated in the march. She also advocated unsuccessfully for the greater involvement of women in the march's organizing and the march itself. And as one of the founders of the National Organization for Women in 1966, Hedgeman ensured that the organization would have a broad and inclusive agenda, one that acknowledged the complications of race and social class as well as gender. If she were here among us today, what would Anna Arnold be advocating? In what ways would she enlist us? Anna Arnold Hedgeman was a Hamline student, a Hamline graduate, one of you. So graduates, as you leave Hamline today in 2016, take the time to reflect on and take pride in your university as the crucible in which the young Anna Arnold formulated or honed many of the ideas, beliefs, and practices that would shape her life and thus also shape our nation. Look around you and appreciate the many people, from your families to your faculty to your friends, who helped instill important values in you, who helped shape you, who helped you achieve the result you celebrate today. As you have, Anna Arnold Hedgeman engaged in a deep intellectual manner with the problems of the world. In the process, she became a person who could make demands and exercise compassion, a person who respected herself and others, a person who lived her values. What has Hamline given you? What values have you had the opportunity to be introduced to, or hone, or complicate, or perhaps refute, as you have prepared to make your way in the world as professionals and as citizens? Remember, graduates, that Hamline values matter in the world. Remember that with your insights, your intelligence, and your commitment, the world can shift. Remember your fellow alum, Anna Arnold Hedgeman, who fought relentlessly for change, promising that, quote, in her words, quote, "We will not rest until there is justice in our beloved country. And we know that as justice comes to all Americans, it will come in increasing measure to the people of the world." Congratulations, class of 2016, for all you have accomplished, and best wishes as you forge ahead.